The sound of shattering glass echoed through the Boston townhouse as Deanna Kendrick pressed herself against the mahogany door, her heart hammering so violently she thought it might burst through her ribcage. Her husband's furious shouting had finally driven her to a decision she should have made 3 years ago, when she first realized that Charles Kendrick's polite courtship had been nothing more than a calculated performance. Now, at 24 years old, she understood that staying would mean surrendering whatever remained of her soul. She had packed only what she could carry in a single carpet bag, leaving behind the expensive dresses and jewelry that had felt more like chains than adornments. Her grandmother's locket was the only valuable thing she took, tucked safely inside her bodice along with the money she had been secretly saving for 2 years. It was not much, but it would have to be enough. The train ticket to California had cost most of her reserves, but Deanna did not care. She needed distance, wilderness, a place where Charles and his family's influence could not reach. The year was 1881, and the West still promised freedom to those brave or desperate enough to seek it. Diana was both. 3 weeks later, covered in dust and exhausted beyond anything she had ever experienced, Deanna stepped off the stagecoach in Skidoo, California. The small mining town sat in the harsh embrace of the Panamint Mountains, where the desert heat beat down with merciless intensity. The main street was little more than a collection of rough wooden buildings, their unpainted facades bleached gray by the relentless sun. Men in worn work clothes and battered hats turned to stare at her, and Deanna realized how out of place she must look in her traveling dress, despite the dust that now coated it. She had chosen Skidoo precisely because it was small and remote, a place where news from Boston would take months to arrive if it came at all. The town had sprung up around the Skidoo gold mine, and most of its residents were miners, merchants, or those who serviced both. Deanna had no illusions about finding refined society here. That was exactly what she wanted. The hotel was a modest establishment with thin walls and questionable plumbing, but the woman who ran it, a weathered widow named Mrs. Patterson, asked no uncomfortable questions when Deanna paid for a week in advance. The room was tiny, containing only a narrow bed, a washstand, and a single chair, but it was hers. That night, Deanna lay awake listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the desert town and allowed herself to cry for the first time since leaving Boston. They were not tears of regret, but of relief mixed with terror at the uncertainty ahead. In the morning, Deanna set about finding work. Her funds would last perhaps another month if she was careful, but she needed to establish herself. The problem was that her skills were those of a wealthy man's wife. She could embroider, play piano, manage servants, and make polite conversation. None of these abilities had practical value in a mining town. After 2 days of searching, she found employment at the general store. The owner, Mr. Hutchins, was skeptical at first, but Diana's clear handwriting and ability to calculate figures quickly convinced him she could manage his accounts and serve customers. The pay was modest, but it included meals, which would help stretch her remaining money. For 2 months, Diana settled into a rhythm that was utterly foreign to her previous life. She woke before dawn, helped Mrs. Patterson with breakfast in exchange for reduced rent, then worked at the store until evening. Her hands, once soft and carefully maintained, developed calluses. Her fair skin, despite her best efforts, acquired a faint tan that would have horrified her mother. She learned to speak plainly, to laugh at rough jokes, to dodge the occasional drunken miner with practiced ease. She also learned that Skidoo, for all its roughness, had a kind of honesty that Boston society had lacked. People said what they meant. If they did not like you, they showed it. If they did, They would share their last dollar or offer help without expecting elaborate thanks. It was refreshing and terrifying in equal measure. Diana had just begun to feel like she might actually build a life here when Charles Kendrick sent his brother to find her. Thomas Kendrick arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, stepping into the general store with the same entitled confidence that characterized his entire family. He was younger than Charles by 3 years, handsome in a cold way, and he looked around the rough interior with obvious disdain before his eyes landed on Diana behind the counter. "So it is true," he said without preamble. "My brother's wife, playing at being a shop girl." Diana's stomach dropped, but she kept her voice steady. "I am not his wife anymore, Thomas. I left. You married him in the eyes of God and the law. You do not get to simply leave." Thomas approached the counter, lowering his voice. "Charles is willing to overlook this embarrassing episode if you return immediately. He has told everyone you are visiting a sick relative." "I am not returning." Thomas's expression hardened. "You will, or Charles will have you declared mentally unfit and institutionalized. He has doctors who will swear to anything. You know he has that power." Diana did know. The Kendrick family's influence in Boston was considerable, and women had been locked away for less than abandoning their marriages. Her hands trembled as she gripped the counter's edge. "Diana, be reasonable," Thomas continued, his tone softening into something that might have been mistaken for concern. "You have no money, no prospects, no future here. Come home. This is my home now. For how long? Until the money runs out. Until some minor decides you would make a good target. You are being foolish." Mr. Hutchins emerged from the back room, eyeing Thomas with the suspicious regard that locals reserved for wealthy strangers. "Everything all right here, Diana?" Before she could answer, Thomas pulled out a folded document. "I have legal papers authorizing me to escort Mrs. Kendrick back to Boston. She is my brother's wife and he wants her home." "The lady says she is staying," Mr. Hutchins replied calmly. "The law says otherwise." Diana felt the walls closing in. She should have known Charles would not let her go so easily. His pride would not allow it. She opened her mouth to respond, not knowing what she could possibly say, when the store's door opened behind Thomas. The man who entered had to duck slightly to clear the doorframe. He was tall and broad-shouldered, his skin tanned dark from outdoor work, his light brown hair bleached lighter at the ends by the sun. He wore work clothes that were dusty but well-maintained, and there was a quiet confidence in the way he moved. Diana guessed he was in his early 30s. His eyes, a striking gray-green, swept the scene and immediately assessed the tension. "Afternoon, Mr. Hutchins," he said, his voice a deep rumble with the hint of a Texan drawl. "Diana." He nodded to her, and she realized she had seen him in the store before, always polite, never intrusive. She thought someone had mentioned he owned a ranch outside town. "Quincy," Mr. Hutchins replied with obvious relief. "This gentleman was just leaving." "Was I?" Thomas turned to face the newcomer with aristocratic disdain. "And who might you be?" "Quincy Jameson. I have a ranch about 10 miles north." He said it mildly, but there was steel underneath. "Seems like the lady does not want to talk to you. This is a private family matter." "Funny thing about that," Quincy said, moving further into the store with an easy grace that somehow made Thomas step back. "Skidoo's pretty small. We tend to look after our own. And Diana here, she has been part of this town for a few months now. That makes her ours." Diana stared at him, astonished. They had exchanged perhaps a dozen words total in all the times he had come into the store. Thomas's face reddened. "I have legal documentation." "California law is different from back east," Quincy replied. "And the nearest judge is in Independence, 3 days' ride from here. Even if your papers are legitimate, which I am guessing they are not, you would need to petition the local court. That could take weeks, months even." He smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. Plenty of time for people to lose interest in pursuing matters. It was a bluff, Deanna suspected, but it was delivered with such casual confidence that Thomas clearly did not know how to respond. "Charles will not let this go," Thomas finally said, directing his words to Deanna. "You know he will not." "Then Charles can come himself," Quincy interjected. "It is a hard journey. Lots of things can happen on the road. People get lost, turn back, decide it is not worth the trouble." The implicit threat hung in the air. Thomas looked between Quincy and Mr. Hutchins, clearly calculating odds he did not like. Finally, he straightened his jacket and looked at Deanna one last time. "You are making a terrible mistake." "It is mine to make," she said quietly. After Thomas left, the store was silent for a long moment. Deanna realized she was shaking. Mr. Hutchins squeezed her shoulder paternally, then retreated to give her space. Quincy remained by the door, watching through the window as Thomas stalked up the street toward the hotel. "Thank you," Deanna managed. "You did not have to do that." Quincy turned to look at her, and his expression was kind. "Yes, I did. No offense, but that fellow is going to cause you trouble. He will be back, or he will send others. You need to be somewhere safer than a room at Mrs. Patterson's." "I do not have anywhere else to go." "You do now." He said it simply, as if it were obvious. "I have a ranch. It is not fancy, but it is solid. I have a housekeeper, Maria, who lives in the main house with her husband, Roberto. They help me run the place. You could stay there until this blows over." Deanna shook her head automatically. "I could not impose like that. I do not even know you. You know I pay my bills on time and do not cause trouble in town. That is more than most can say." His voice gentled. "Look, I understand if you are uncomfortable with the idea. But if that man contacts the law, you will need somewhere they cannot easily find you. The ranch is remote. Nobody comes out there unless invited. Why would you help me?" Quincy was quiet for a moment, his eyes distant. "Few years back, my sister got herself into a bad marriage. Man seemed fine until the wedding, then showed his true colors. Violent. Mean. By the time she got the courage to leave, she had nowhere to go. Our parents were dead, and I was not yet established enough to help proper. She went back to him. 6 months later, she died." He said she fell down the stairs. His jaw tightened. "Maybe she did, but I will always wonder if I could have saved her if I had tried harder." Diana's throat constricted. "I am so sorry." "Ancient history now," he said, but the pain in his eyes suggested otherwise. "Point is, I see a woman who needs help. I am going to offer it. No strings attached. You can work off your keep by helping Maria with the household accounts and such. I am told I am terrible at paperwork." Mr. Hutchins spoke up from behind the counter. "Quincy's good people, Deanna. One of the best men I know. If he is offering help, you can trust it." Deanna looked at the rancher's weathered, honest face and made a decision that felt simultaneously reckless and right. "All right. But I insist on earning my keep. I will not accept charity." "Would not dream of offering it," Quincy replied with the first genuine smile she had seen from him. "Fair warning, though, ranch work starts early. Hope you do not mind roosters." That evening, after Deanna finished her shift and collected her few belongings from Mrs. Patterson's, Quincy helped her into his wagon. The vehicle was practical rather than comfortable, built for hauling supplies more than passengers, but Deanna did not mind. As they left Skidoo behind, heading north into the rugged landscape, she felt the knot of fear in her chest slowly begin to loosen. Quincy was not much of a talker, but his silence was comfortable rather than oppressive. When he did speak, it was to point out landmarks or warn her about a rough patch in the road. Deanna found herself studying him from the corner of her eye, noting the easy way he handled the reins, the alertness with which he scanned their surroundings. This was a man who knew his environment, who belonged to it in a way she had never belonged anywhere. The ranch appeared as they crested a low rise just as the sun was beginning to set. It was larger than Deanna had expected, with a sturdy two-story house, a big barn, several outbuildings and corrals that currently held a dozen horses. The land stretched out in all directions, punctuated by scrub brush and distant rock formations that glowed red in the fading light. It was harsh country, but there was a raw beauty to it that made her breath catch. A woman emerged from the house as they pulled up, wiping her hands on her apron. She was in her 40s, with black hair streaked with gray and the weathered face of someone who had spent a lifetime under the sun. Her expression was curious but not unfriendly. "Maria," Quincy said as he helped Deanna down from the wagon. "This is Diana Kendrick. She is going to be staying with us for a while, helping with the accounts and such." Maria's sharp eyes took in Deanna's quality dress and soft hands, but whatever she thought, she kept to herself. "Welcome. You look exhausted. Come inside and I will fix you something to eat." The interior of the house was clean and well organized, furnished with simple but solid furniture. It was clear that this was a working ranch, not a showplace, but there was a warmth to it that Diana's Boston townhouse had always lacked. Maria led her upstairs to a small bedroom that contained a bed, a dresser, and a chair positioned by the window. Compared to the finery Deanna had left behind, it was Spartan. Compared to her room at Mrs. Patterson's, it was luxurious. "Supper in an hour," Maria said. "Washroom is down the hall. We keep ranch hours here, so we eat early and rise early. If you need anything, let me know." After Maria left, Deanna sank onto the bed and finally let herself feel the full weight of the day's events. Thomas had found her. Charles knew where she was. The legal threat might have been exaggerated, but the danger was real. Men like Charles did not accept defiance. And yet here she was, on a ranch in the middle of the California desert, under the protection of a man she barely knew. It was insane. It was possibly the best decision she had ever made. Dinner was a simple affair of beef stew, cornbread, and coffee strong enough to strip paint. Deanna sat at the kitchen table with Quincy, Maria, and Maria's husband Roberto, a quiet man with powerful forearms and a gentle demeanor. They talked about ranch matters, the price of cattle, a problem with the north fence line. Deanna listened and tried to be invisible, still feeling like an intruder. After dinner, Quincy walked her out onto the front porch. The night was cool, the sky an impossible expanse of stars unobscured by city lights. Deanna had never seen so many stars. "It takes some getting used to," Quincy said, following her gaze. "The quiet, the space, but most people come to appreciate it." "It is beautiful," Deanna said honestly. Then, because she needed to say it, "I do not know how to thank you for this. You have taken a significant risk helping me." "Your husband, is he a violent man?" The question was direct but not prurient. Deanna considered how to answer. "Not physically, Charles never struck me, but he was cruel in other ways, controlling, dismissive. He married me because I was an appropriate ornament for his political ambitions. When I stopped being useful, when I started having opinions of my own, he made it clear that I was an inconvenience." She wrapped her arms around herself. "I know there are women who endure far worse. Perhaps I am weak for running." "You are not weak," Quincy said firmly. "Take strength to leave, especially when the world tells you to stay. My sister, she was not weak either, just trapped." He was quiet for a moment. "I should tell you, if your husband comes here, I will turn him away, but I will not harm him unless he forces my hand. I am not looking for violence." "I do not want violence either. I just want to be left alone." Then we will do our best to make that happen." He tipped his hat to her. "Sleep well, Deanna. Morning comes early." Diana's first weeks on the ranch were a revelation. She had never worked so hard in her life. Quincy had been serious about the accounts being a mess, and Deanna spent hours each day sorting through receipts, ledgers, and contracts that had been stuffed into boxes with no organization. It was challenging work, but satisfying in a way that needlework and social calls had never been. When she was not working on the books, Maria taught her practical skills: how to cook on the big iron stove, how to preserve meat and vegetables, how to mend work clothes, which was entirely different from the delicate embroidery Diana had learned as a girl. Diana threw herself into learning with an intensity that surprised her. Each new skill felt like armor against the helplessness she had felt in Boston. Quincy was often gone during the day, working on the ranch with Roberto and the handful of cowboys he employed seasonally. But in the evenings, he would return dust-covered and tired, wash up at the pump, and join them for dinner. Diana found herself looking forward to those meals, to the easy conversation and the sense of being part of something functional. She also found herself noticing things about Quincy. The way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled, the patience he showed with the animals, even when they were being difficult, the respect with which he treated Maria and Roberto, never pulling rank or making them feel lesser. He was kind without being soft, strong without being domineering. He was, Diana slowly realized, everything Charles had pretended to be. One evening about a month after her arrival, Quincy asked if she wanted to learn to ride. Diana had ridden before, but only the sedate pace considered appropriate for ladies in Boston. Quincy put her on a gentle mare named Daisy and spent an hour teaching her how to sit properly, how to signal the horse, how to move with the animal rather than against it. "You are a natural," he said after she managed a smooth trot around the corral. There was genuine pleasure in his voice, as if her success made him happy. Diana laughed, flushed with exertion and pride. "I doubt that, but thank you for saying so. I mean it. Most greenhorns tense up, fight the horse. You are listening to her." He leaned against the fence, watching her with an expression she could not quite read. "You have changed since you got here. You seem lighter." "I feel lighter," Diana admitted, bringing Daisy to a stop near him. "For the first time in years, I feel like I can breathe." Their eyes met, and something passed between them, something electric and dangerous and thrilling. Diana looked away first, her heart hammering for reasons that had nothing to do with the riding. "We should head in," Quincy said, his voice slightly rough. "Getting dark." That night, lying in bed, Diana forced herself to confront the truth she had been avoiding. She was developing feelings for Quincy Jameson. Deep feelings. It was foolish and complicated and possibly disastrous. She was still legally married, still being hunted by Charles. She had no right to drag Quincy further into her mess. And yet, she could not seem to stop her heart from wanting what it wanted. The situation came to a head 2 weeks later, when a man arrived at the ranch claiming to be a federal marshal. He was tall and officious, with papers that looked legitimate, and a story about Diana being wanted for theft of her husband's property. Quincy met him at the gate, blocking access to the ranch house where Diana was working on the accounts, her heart pounding so hard she thought she might be sick. "I will need to see those papers properly," Quincy said calmly, "and I will need to verify your credentials with the marshal's office in Independence." "This is federal business," the man blustered. "I do not need local authorization." "Maybe not, but you need my permission to come onto my land. And I am not granting it until I know you are who you say you are." Quincy crossed his arms. "You can wait in town while I send a wire. Should hear back in a day or two." The man's eyes narrowed. "Are you obstructing justice?" I am protecting my property and my people. Big difference. The standoff lasted another few minutes before the man finally retreated, promising to return with proper local support. After he left, Quincy came into the house and found Deanna white-faced at the kitchen table. "Was he legitimate?" she asked. "Probably not, but I am going to check anyway." Quincy sat across from her, his expression serious. "Deanna, we need to talk about your options. Your husband is not going to stop. He is going to keep sending people, keep applying pressure. Eventually, something is going to give. What can I do? I have no legal standing. A woman who leaves her husband has no rights. You could fight him, get a lawyer, make a case for cruelty or abandonment." Deanna laughed bitterly. "With what money? And what lawyer would take a case against the Kendricks? Charles's family has influence everywhere." "Not everywhere," Quincy said quietly. "Not here." They sat in silence for a long moment. Finally, Deanna said what had been growing in her heart for weeks. "I should leave. Go further west, maybe to San Francisco or Oregon, somewhere big enough that I can disappear." "I am putting you at risk by staying." "Do not," Quincy said, his voice sharper than she had ever heard it. "Do not run again." "What choice do I have? Stay, fight. Let me help you." "Why?" Deanna asked, frustrated and frightened and confused. "Why does this matter so much to you?" "I am just some woman you barely know who brought trouble to your door." Quincy stood abruptly, pacing to the window. For a long moment he did not speak. When he finally did, his voice was low and raw. "Because I am falling in love with you, and I am tired of pretending I am not." Deanna's breath caught. She stood slowly, her legs unsteady. "Quincy." He turned to face her, his expression vulnerable in a way she had never seen. "I know the timing is terrible. I know you are still married and dealing with God knows what. I am not asking you for anything. But I am not going to let you run away and spend the rest of my life wondering what might have been if I had been brave enough to say something." Deanna crossed the room without conscious thought, driven by something deeper than logic. When she reached him, she put her hand on his chest, feeling his heart pound beneath her palm. "I am falling in love with you too," she whispered. "I have been trying so hard not to." Quincy's hand came up to cup her face, his touch gentle despite his calluses. "Then stop trying." When he kissed her, it was nothing like the perfunctory kisses Charles had given her. This was heat and hunger and tenderness all at once. Deanna kissed him back with years of repressed longing, her hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer. Quincy made a sound low in his throat and deepened the kiss, his arms coming around her to hold her tight. They broke apart only when breathing became necessary. Quincy rested his forehead against hers, his breathing ragged. "I want to do this right," he said. "I want to court you properly, marry you legally, but first we need to deal with your husband." Deanna nodded, still trying to catch her breath. "How? I have an idea, but you are going to have to trust me." The next morning, Quincy rode into Skidoo and sent a telegram directly to Charles Kendrick in Boston. The message was simple and direct. Deanna was safe. She was not coming back. Charles could pursue legal action if he wished, but it would be costly, time-consuming, and very public. Alternatively, he could grant her a quiet divorce on grounds of irreconcilable differences and save everyone the embarrassment and expense. It was a gamble. Men like Charles did not respond well to ultimatums, but Quincy was betting that Charles's political ambitions would outweigh his pride. A long, messy legal battle over a runaway wife would be exactly the kind of scandal that could damage a man's reputation. The response came 3 weeks later. Charles's lawyer sent documents agreeing to a divorce, contingent on Deanna relinquishing all claims to Kendrick property and assets. She was also required to never speak publicly about her marriage or the reasons for its dissolution. Deanna signed the papers without hesitation. She wanted nothing from Charles except her freedom. The day the finalized divorce papers arrived, Quincy took Deanna riding out to a high point on the ranch where they could see for miles in every direction. The desert stretched out beneath them, vast and beautiful and unforgiving. Deanna breathed in the clean air and felt the last chains fall away. "It is over," she said wonderingly. "I am actually free." Quincy dismounted and helped her down, his hands lingering on her waist. "You are free," he confirmed. Then he dropped to one knee. Deanna's hands flew to her mouth. "Deanna Kendrick, I know we have not known each other long, but I have never been more certain of anything in my life." He pulled out a simple gold band. "I do not have much to offer except a working ranch, a lot of hard days, and a man who loves you more than he thought possible. Will you marry me?" "Yes," Deanna said, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, absolutely yes." He stood and kissed her, and it felt like coming home. They were married a month later in a simple ceremony in Skidoo's small church. Maria and Roberto stood up with them, along with Mr. Hutchins and several of the ranch hands. Deanna wore a simple blue dress that Maria had helped her make, and she carried wildflowers that Quincy had picked that morning. It was nothing like her first wedding with its hundreds of guests and elaborate trappings. It was infinitely better. The first year of marriage was an education. Deanna learned that love was not just the passionate kisses and tender moments, though there were plenty of those. Love was also Quincy teaching her to mend tack, his patience infinite even when she fumbled. It was working side by side in companionable silence. It was arguing about the best way to organize the accounts, and then laughing at how seriously they were taking it. It was the way he looked at her across the dinner table, as if she were the most precious thing in the world. Deanna also learned that she was stronger than she had ever imagined. She learned to rope cattle, to help with branding, to ride out and check on the herds. Her hands became rough and her skin tanned despite her hats and long sleeves. She learned to shoot, to track, to read the weather. She became a ranch wife in truth, not just in name. Quincy, for his part, seemed continually amazed that she was his. He told her he loved her every single day, sometimes multiple times. He asked her opinion on ranch decisions and actually listened to her answers. He brought her coffee in the morning and rubbed her feet in the evening. He made her laugh and held her when she cried on the rare occasions when memories of Boston grew too heavy. Their first real fight was about money. Deanna wanted to invest in expanding the ranch's breeding program, while Quincy thought they should wait another year to build up reserves. They argued for an entire day, both stubborn, both convinced they were right. That night, lying in bed with their backs to each other, Deanna finally said, "I hate fighting with you." "I hate it too," Quincy admitted, "but I am not backing down just to keep the peace." "You are too smart for me to patronize like that." Deanna rolled over to face him. "I am not backing down either." They stared at each other and then simultaneously started laughing. They talked through it properly, examining numbers and projections, and came to a compromise that incorporated both their ideas. Afterward, making love with the fight behind them and respect still intact, Deanna thought that this was what partnership actually meant. 2 years into their marriage, Deanna realized she was pregnant. She told Quincy at dinner, and he dropped his fork, his face cycling through shock, joy, and terror in rapid succession. "Are you happy?" she asked, suddenly uncertain. He was around the table in an instant, pulling her into his arms. "Happy does not begin to cover it. I am terrified and elated and about a dozen other things I do not have words for." "Me too," Deanna admitted. "I have no idea how to be a mother." "Good thing you have 9 months to figure it out," Quincy said, kissing her temple. "We will learn together." The pregnancy was difficult. Deanna was sick for the first 4 months and exhausted for most of the remainder. Quincy hovered anxiously, driving her crazy with his concern, but she loved him for it anyway. Maria became an invaluable source of information and support, having raised 5 children of her own. Their son was born on a clear November morning in 1884. The labor was long and painful, and there were moments when Deanna thought she might not survive it. But finally, after 18 hours, the baby emerged with a lusty cry that announced his displeasure at the world. Quincy, who had been pacing outside the room despite Diana's insistence that he could stay, rushed in at the sound. "A boy," Deanna said weakly, cradling the tiny, wrinkled creature. "We have a son." Quincy's eyes were wet as he carefully touched the baby's head. "He is perfect. You are perfect. Thank you." They named him Samuel after Quincy's father. Sam proved to be a loud, demanding infant who kept them up most nights and challenged every assumption Deanna had about parenting. But he was theirs, created from their love, and Diana found reserves of patience and strength she had not known she possessed. Watching Quincy with Sam was a revelation. He was gentle and playful, singing off-key lullabies and making ridiculous faces to elicit baby smiles. He changed diapers without complaint and walked the floor at 3 in the morning so Diana could sleep. He was a true partner in parenting, not just a distant figure who occasionally acknowledged his child's existence. As Sam grew from infant to toddler, Deanna sometimes thought back to her life in Boston and marveled at how much had changed. That woman who had fled in the night seemed like a stranger now. She had been so small, so constrained by expectations and fear. The woman she was now, weathered and strong and loved, bore little resemblance to that frightened girl. When Sam was 3, Diana discovered she was pregnant again. This pregnancy was easier than the first, and their daughter arrived with much less drama on a warm spring afternoon. They named her Emily, and she had Quincy's gray-green eyes and Diana's dark hair. Sam was fascinated by his baby sister, wanting to help with everything and occasionally needing to be gently redirected when his help became too enthusiastic. Life settled into a busy, chaotic rhythm. The ranch continued to grow and prosper, thanks in large part to Diana's careful financial management and Quincy's skill with cattle and horses. They hired more hands as the operation expanded, and Quincy's reputation as a fair employer meant they always had good people willing to work for them. Maria and Roberto became like family, their own children visiting regularly and treating Diana and Quincy as beloved aunt and uncle. The community of Skidoo itself became home in a way Boston never had. Diana made real friends, women who did not care about her background or social standing but valued her for who she was. She became involved in establishing a school, using some of the Kendrick money she had once disdained to help fund it. On their 5th anniversary, Quincy took Diana back to the high point where he had proposed. They left the children with Maria and rode out at sunset, just the two of them. The desert was painted gold and purple, breathtakingly beautiful. "You ever regret it?" Quincy asked as they stood looking out over the land. Leaving Boston, giving up that life, Deanna turned to look at her husband, this good man who had given her everything that mattered. "Not for a single second. You showed me what love actually meant. Real love, the kind that is a choice you make every day, the kind that builds rather than diminishes." She took his hand. "You saved my life, Quincy Jameson." He pulled her close, kissing her with the same passion as their first kiss years ago. "You saved mine too. I did not even know I was lonely until you walked into that general store and made everything brighter." They stayed until full dark, talking about their dreams for the future, laughing at memories, planning for the years ahead. When they finally rode back, the ranch house glowed with lamplight, warm and welcoming. Home. The years continued to pass, each one building on the last. Sam grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved working with the horses and following his father around the ranch. Emily was more adventurous, climbing everything and showing an early talent for getting into trouble that kept Deanna constantly alert. When Sam was 10 and Emily 7, Deanna and Quincy had another child, a surprise baby they named Jacob. By then, Deanna was 35 and Quincy was 41, and they had assumed their family was complete. But Jacob arrived with the same determination that had characterized everything in Deanna's new life, and they welcomed him with joy, if not quite the panic of first-time parents. The children grew up knowing they were loved without question. Quincy was firm but fair, teaching them the value of hard work while also making time for play. Deanna educated them herself in reading and mathematics, using materials she ordered from San Francisco, and told them stories about a wider world they might someday explore, if they wished. She also told them, in age-appropriate ways, about her first marriage and her flight to freedom. She wanted them to understand that love should be freely given, not coerced. That marriage should be a partnership of equals, that they should never settle for someone who diminished them rather than celebrated them. Sometimes, lying in bed at night with Quincy's arms around her, Deanna would think about the terrified woman who had stepped off that stagecoach in Skidoo so many years ago. She would think about Thomas Kendrick's threats, about the fake marshal, about all the ways her story could have gone wrong. And she would feel profound gratitude for the courage she had found to keep running, to accept help, to open her heart again. On their 20th anniversary, Quincy surprised her by taking her to San Francisco for a week. It was the first time either of them had left the ranch for more than a day in years. Maria and Roberto stayed with the children, who were old enough now not to need constant supervision. Sam was 18 and practically running the ranch himself. Emily was 15 and already showing signs of being even more capable than her brother. Jacob, at 8, was just learning to rope. The city was overwhelming after so many years of wide open spaces. Deanna clung to Quincy's arm as they navigated the crowded streets, marveling at the shops and restaurants and theaters. They stayed in a nice hotel, ate at fancy restaurants, and saw a play. It was fun, exciting even, but when the week ended, Deanna was ready to go home. The city felt constricting now, too many people pressed too close together. She missed the space to breathe, the sight of stars at night, the smell of sage and dust. Most of all, she missed the life they had built together. "I used to think I wanted this," Deanna said on the train ride back, gesturing to the receding city. "Sophistication, culture, excitement. And now," Quincy asked, "now I know that everything I need is waiting at home." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "Did you enjoy it?" "Sure," Quincy said. "But I am with you. Give me our porch and a sunset over all of this any day." They arrived back at the ranch to find that Sam had managed everything perfectly in their absence, and had even solved a problem with a broken fence that had been plaguing them. Emily had kept the household accounts updated. Jacob had apparently talked nonstop about when his parents were coming home, driving his siblings crazy, which Deanna found adorable and everyone else found exhausting. Life continued its steady rhythm. Deanna watched her children grow into young adults, each finding their own path. Sam married a sensible woman named Catherine who was a rancher's daughter and took to ranch life immediately. They built a house on the northern section of the property and started their own family. Emily, to no one's surprise, announced at 18 that she wanted to train as a teacher and moved to Independence to attend the teaching college there. She returned 2 years later with her certificate, and a husband, a bookish young lawyer named David who somehow managed to keep up with his whirlwind wife. Jacob proved to be the one most like his father, quiet and steady with an intuitive understanding of animals. He was content to stay on the ranch, learning every aspect of the business, clearly intending to take over someday. By the time Deanna was 50, she was a grandmother 5 times over, with Sam and Catherine having 3 children and Emily and David having 2. The ranch had expanded significantly, one of the most successful operations in the region. Quincy's hair had gone gray, and Deanna had laugh lines around her eyes and silver threading through her dark hair. They were older, slower, their bodies bearing the marks of decades of hard work and good living. But when Quincy looked at her, it was still with the same intensity as that day in the general store when he had stepped between her and Thomas Kendrick. When Deanna kissed him, it still made her heart flutter the way it had when he first pulled her into his arms. Time had not diminished what they had. If anything, it had deepened it, adding layers of shared experience and weathered challenges to the foundation of love they had built. On a warm summer evening, sitting on their porch and watching the sun set over land they had worked and loved for decades, Quincy took Deanna's hand. His grip was not as strong as it once was, arthritis having set in, but the gesture was as tender as ever. "Do you remember when I asked if you regretted leaving Boston?" he asked. "I could never regret it," Deanna said immediately. "Why do you ask?" "Because I want you to know that every single day I have spent with you has been a gift. You made my life mean something beyond just surviving. You gave me a family, a purpose, a reason to wake up grateful every morning." His voice was thick with emotion. "I know I do not say it fancy like those Boston folks probably did, but Deanna, you are the best thing that ever happened to me." Deanna felt tears prick her eyes. After all these years, he could still move her so deeply. "You are everything, Quincy Jameson. You taught me what love actually meant. Not control, not possession, not even just romance. You taught me that love is showing up every day, choosing each other again and again, building something bigger than either of us alone." She squeezed his hand. "You gave me a life worth living." They sat in comfortable silence as the sky turned from gold to purple to deep blue. In the distance, they could hear Sam talking to the horses, Emily's laughter floating from the house where she was visiting with her children, Jacob's voice calling goodnight as he headed to his cabin. The ranch was alive with the family they had created, the legacy of that choice Deanna had made so long ago to keep running, to accept help, to risk her heart again. "I love you," Quincy said, as he had said thousands of times before and would say thousands of times more. "I love you too," Deanna replied, meaning it with every fiber of her being. The stars began to appear one by one, filling the vast sky with light. Deanna rested her head on Quincy's shoulder, feeling his heartbeat, steady and strong. Somewhere in Boston, Charles Kendrick had probably lived and died, though Deanna had never sought information about him. That part of her life was so distant it might have happened to someone else entirely. This was her real life. These decades of hard work and deep love. The children and grandchildren who filled their home with noise and chaos and joy. The land they had built their lives upon. The man beside her who had shown her that love was not a cage but wings. Deanna Kendrick had run from a loveless marriage and found everything she had never known she was searching for. She had learned that strength was not something you were born with, but something you built through facing fears and making hard choices. She had learned that home was not a place but a person, a feeling, a choice renewed each morning. As they sat together under the endless California sky, Deanna felt complete. Her life had not been easy. There had been struggles, losses, hard years, and difficult moments. But she had faced them all with Quincy at her side, and that had made all the difference. The rancher had shown her what love actually meant. And in doing so, he had given her everything. The end.